Welcome back to another episode of The Long Haul Mentality. I am your host, as always, Nick Bagley, and this week I have Lianna McCall on, IFBB Pro, turned pro in figure, and is now going into wellness. And she is the wife of last week's guest, Elias McCall. So, how are you? You doing good this morning?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. It was good to see you yesterday at the gym. How'd the session go with the client?
It was good.
Yeah.
I run a device called a NeuX out of Destination Dallas and Fox Fitness over in Fort Worth. It's basically it uses an interactive neuromuscular stimulus. So it delivers an electrical signal to the muscle tissue. So I work with a lot of clients that have injuries or can't connect mentally or have that mind to muscle connection with the muscle tissue. And this kind of reactivates that tissue and helps it fire better.
Yeah, that machine's awesome for anyone who's like she said, dealing with injuries or you're struggling to connect with something. Like that machine will definitely make it happen.
Yeah.
Anytime there's something that's like beyond just a small tweak to things, if it's like they're really struggling to connect with something, or they've got like a nerve problem or whatever it might be, like that machine is fantastic. So I used one similar to it a lot because we used to have another trainer at the gym that had a a different version of it. I don't remember what it was called, but I always confuse the names. But it's the same process. But yeah, anyone who wants to feel a crazy pump from like no weight at all, definitely hit up Liana. She trains out of the same gym I do. So, but yeah, like we already kind of discussed, I wanted to focus on your mindset going into your pro career. Because like I mentioned in the beginning, you turned pro as a figure athlete. And then now after having like gone through that process a little bit, you've decided you were going to compete in the future as a wellness competitor, correct?
hmm
So when did you turn pro in figure?
So I turned pro in figure at USA's in 2018.
Awesome.
I got first place in my class, and then that was in July of 2018. And then in May, I believe, of 2019, I competed at the Puerto Rico Pro. I
Cool.
got sixth place, so that was first call outs at my first pro show. And then the second pro show that I did was in 2021, and I got 12th at the Kentucky Pro. So
And
big difference in placing there. I looked
when you
very.
competed in figure, what was your feedback? Like what were they telling you?
They were telling me that I needed my upper body to be like a lot bigger,
Okay.
and I just didn't have that muscle maturity in my upper body that a lot of these girls that were older than me at the time had. And I wasn't able to get that like density in my upper mid back that is needed for figure. Um, and it's something that no matter what,
You did.
sorry, it glitched. No matter what I was doing, I couldn't get that area to grow. So um, my legs look great, and I was holding back the training on my legs in order to like build my upper body. So I was kind of training the complete opposite as I am now. So now I'm only doing lower body with like a very light upper body mixed in once or twice a month. And we were just talking about this yesterday too.
Yep.
Um, but
Training
Elias
sport.
asked, yeah,
Legs.
Elias asked me this yesterday. But he was like, "Do you like how you feel and how you look better now?" And I guess if you're talking just on stage, I like how figure looks better. But for everyday life and how I feel the majority of the time, I like how I feel having a wellness physique a lot better. So I don't feel like I'm carrying so much tissue in my upper body. I feel more comfortable. It's a lot more comfortable to carry more muscle tissue in your lower body than it is to not fit into t-shirts and not fit into any jackets you wear. So
Right.
and that's like a double-edged sword, and I spent a good 6 months kind of debating, do I want to do this or do I not want to do this, and like this is a risk if I go this path and it doesn't work out, or if I'm not gonna end up where I think I could end up, because at the time I had some health issues and I had lost a lot of muscle tissue to begin with. Like if you look at pictures when I started my transition to wellness, I basically looked like I should have been doing bikini and not wellness. But I've put on a lot of tissue since then. And Cam, my coach, was kind of reluctant to let me switch. He was like, "Look, you have such good shape and figure." I was
Right.
like, "Dude, just trust me. Like, I really feel like I can do this." And he was like, "All right, I'm going to let you do what you think." And then, like, a year and a half down the road, he's like, "Okay, you were right. Like,
Yep.
this is where you belong. Like, you totally had this right in your mind, and like, I'm glad you went through with it."
Well,
So,
kudos to him for listening to his athlete, because I think a lot of times coaches will see things one way and they're like, no, this is what we got to do. This is where things are, and like this is how um, this is where you need to be. But kudos to him for that, and like your body was kind of telling you like, hey, this is what we need to do. This is where we need to be, and this is how your body wants to grow. So like it sounds like from a standpoint of like your results in the gym, the mental shift was pretty easy, but like maybe it wasn't so easy with like what you prefer as a look. Like, because you said you like the figure and that kind of thing, and I mean, some people may see it different, but I feel like figure, physique, and women's bodybuilding are like this version of a women's category, and then you have wellness, bikini, and the new fit model category kind of over here,
yeah.
where the the figure and up is more just like, let's put on tissue, let's put on as much mass everywhere as we can
Mhm.
within the realm of whatever category you're going for. And wellness, bikini, and fit model are a little bit less muscular. Wellness being the higher end of that muscularity, but it's like a very disproportionate thing of like lower body. And I've obviously not everyone is this way, but I feel like a lot of girls, and especially with the way bikini and wellness has like blown up, it's like most women want to kind of go that direction. Most women aren't looking to like every guy wants to fill out a t-shirt and have their arms like push against a t-shirt and look really jacked and stuff. Like I know very few women that are like, I want to be absolutely jacked in my t-shirts.
Yeah.
It's like,
And
so I mean,
I do love how I looked in figure too. I just think my genetic potential is better suited for wellness. And I was like, I can take a little bit more time and possibly get here versus like spinning my wheels, taking a lot more, doing like having to run my brain into the ground trying to put on all this tissue. And I like am not genetically gifted in that area, but I feel like my genetics work better with wellness, if that makes any
yep.
sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I think one of the things we can really focus on this with the mental thing here is like it's a difficult task to like get yourself to mentally want to shift those categories when you really like the figure
Yeah.
category. And like I've seen your pictures of you in figure, like you have a good structure, and if
Mhm.
you were able to continue to build your upper body that way, it would have been a no-brainer of like, yeah,
Yeah.
cool, well, let's stay here. But when your body's like fighting you tooth and nail, and the goal is to like, I mean, you're pro, it's not like you just want to continue to compete and place. Nobody wants to place low at shows. And if your body's telling you like, hey, we don't want to do this, like it only makes sense to kind of shift here.
Yeah. And I
Um,
was in a lot more pain too. Like my traps are always tight and sore. And like I was in a lot of like shoulder pain and back pain. I don't get any of that now, which is great. Because I feel like my lower body can handle the amount of stress that I put on it, even with training it more frequently than I was training back or arms or whatever it was. Um, but I think at the end of the day, it comes down to like how far do you want to get in the sport
yep.
and what's your goal long term. So if your goal is just to compete and have fun with it and do what you like to do, then compete in the division that you like. But if your goal is to go far and to get a pro card or to win a pro show or end up at the Olympia, like you kind of have to match what your genetics want you to do. And you don't really have a choice. Like if I had a really big blocky waist, I my only choice really at this point would be to do women's physique because that's kind of where my genetics would set me at. And there's certain features that people have that you can't outwork or outtrain or outperform or out supplement that. It's just that's what God gave you, and you have to fit that into a division.
Yep.
So it's like, do you want to do well in the sport and match where your genetics fit you, or are you just doing this for fun and because you like it, and do you want to do a division that you like doing and possibly not place as well? So
100%.
it's that's what I see all of these like division selections coming back to. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword, but I chose to go the route that I feel my genetics work in my favor.
Yeah, very smart. I want to pause this for just a second because I think I got to change my mic.
Okay.
All right. Well, anyways, so yeah, I think that's something that's really important for a lot of people to pay attention to is like you need to have a discussion with yourself of you might really like one category or the next, right? You might really like figure or you might really like wellness, but your body just does not want to do that. It doesn't want to build that tissue in that area. And look, I had a wellness girl last year that she hadn't trained upper body in 2 years, but even holding dumbbells, doing lower body exercises was causing her shoulders and her back to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And when we go to the shows, the biggest things that they would tell her is that because the division is so highly focused on an imbalance in the physique, because they don't want, like, they want muscularity upper body, but they don't want it in proportion with the lower body. They want a disproportionate, huge
Mm-hmm.
butt, huge quads, huge hamstrings. Like that's everything. And then they want you to be muscular up top, but not like overwhelmingly so. And her body didn't want to grow the legs that that were required for wellness. And that we would hear the same thing over and over again of like, hey, you need more lower body, you need more lower body. And it's like she's training a ton of volume. She's training legs 4 days a week. And I'm only getting so much out of this. So it's like you can keep beating your head against the wall. But when you're telling me that you want to go pro and win these shows and stuff, if that is the case, you probably need to look into figure. And that ended up becoming a reason that she ended up ultimately stepping away from me because she didn't like what I had to say there. But like, it
Yeah,
is what it is, and it's your body is telling you, hey, look, well, I really want to have a big upper body, so why not lean into that strength? If the goal is I want to turn pro,
I
if
totally
you're
agree.
fine with just continuing year after year doing the things that you need to do to stay in the category but like not necessarily getting the places you want, then that's ultimately your decision. But like you're probably going to get beat down after a while when you're not getting the places you think you deserve, you know.
Yeah.
And that's not a fun place for anyone to be in, you know.
And I think with the men's division, it's like there's only three men's divisions. So it's a little bit just more like, oh, how big can you get?
Yep.
Versus with the female divisions, there's a lot more like, where are your genetics more structured to versus like this is just how big I can get. So figures a little bit more, or it is more balanced and X frame, and they want all of that. But you also can't do figure if you don't have like a really small little waist, because that's the main part that they're looking at that gives you that V taper and that nice shape. Like if you look at Sid Gillen, she's not huge. Like if you've ever met her in person, she's not a huge human being at all, but she has this tiny little waist
Mhm.
and she has nice big bubbly muscles, and it gives you that like hourglass X frame that they're looking for.
Right.
But if she had a little bit more blocky waist, she probably would have been fit better in women's physique. Not to say that all women's physique girls have blocky waists by any means, but like if you're able to fit into that division, you have the capability to put on more muscle tissue, and you can make that look bigger and build it out
Exactly.
and not make your waist look as big as it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. It definitely makes sense. And I mean, like, that's especially this day and age, there's such a focus on the midsection, like, or like late 90s, early 2000s. Obviously, there was like a get as big as you can kind of thing going on. And like, there was a lot of physiques that kind of went the wrong direction because their stomach started to get out of shape with the ultimate focus on, like, let me just see how big I can possibly get. But obviously, that shifted now. So, like, in any of these categories, we want to try and have the smallest waist we possibly can.
Hmm.
But if you're an individual that just does not genetically have that, like I don't really have that, right? Like I don't have a super tiny waist. It's not huge by any means, but it's not small.
Hmm.
So me trying to fit into classic, I was never going to have the structure that I needed at the weight cap that I was given in order for me to look the way I needed to get the places that I need. So,
Hmm.
like, if your waist is not that super tiny thing that we were talking about, you probably need to go into a higher muscularity category in order to create the taper that they're looking for in that class. So, like, meaning you have to get as big as you can while maintaining whatever size waist you possibly can so that you can create that X frame. And like, you would never see someone who has a structure like Nick Walker go into classic and do well.
Hmm.
So with someone like him, if you're looking at going further in the sport, not just like showing up competing and like that was fun, you're going to have to put on as much tissue as you can so that your waist is now not something that inhibits you from going forward. So now with one of the things you said earlier, I want to go back a little bit is like when you originally had the conversation with Cam and you guys made that switch, you said it took you a year and a half of focusing on the wellness division and training in that manner before he started to go, okay, I think you're on to something here. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't put enough emphasis into is giving themselves enough timeline and giving themselves the appropriate amount of time to build into a category, right? And like the it seems as if most people who try to compete feel like they are falling behind or a failure or whatever it might be if they do not compete every year, right?
Yeah.
And that ultimately is going to be the thing that inhibits you the most. So even though you have a body that wants to put on leg size and wants to build that, it still took you a year and a half to start getting to a point where like, oh, I do have the wellness shape and I can potentially compete here. So once you made that switch, do you feel like it was one of those things that like did you notice it right away of like I think I enjoy this more, or did it take you that full time as well to like really realize like this is where I needed to fit?
So I wasn't all in on it initially. I kind of like dipped my toes in and was like, I'm going to do 2 upper body days and then 3 lower body days and just see how I respond. And I started liking how I felt a lot better. And then I was like, I think it was like 6 or 7 months before I was like, okay, I'm going to pull out this other upper body day because I was doing push and pull and then like 3 lower body days. And I was like, I'm still like holding this muscle tissue in my upper body. Like, even doing 3 legs days a week isn't enough to make it disproportionate. So I was like, all right, I need to pull this other day out. And that's when I started seeing more changes to where I was like, okay, I actually look like I fit into wellness now. And it was after I did that that I was like, okay, this is where that like mindset shift happened. And I was able to like fully go all in on it. And because I really didn't know. And I was kind of in this like limbo with my health at the time. So it was kind of in like a health phase because I had some gut issues back then. And there wasn't really a ton of progress happening anyways, so it was very minimal when I did see things happen. And after I pulled that second upper body day out, I was able to like really focus on that recovery in my lower body and then focus on also decreasing the size in my upper body so that I could fit the division. And it was like, yes, I do like training this a lot, but what's my end goal? Like, do I want to have this big upper body and step on stage next to these girls that look completely different and are at the pro level? And I've never competed as a wellness competitor yet, like at all, on an amateur stage, on a pro stage, like ever. So I have to get up next to these girls that have done Olympia and compete next to them. And I want to look like I belong up there. So I
Right.
have to do all of these things, XYZ, regardless of what I like doing. I have to fit the division. So it took that to be able to like really hone in and commit 100% to it, regardless of what I felt emotionally. Like, okay, I do like training upper body, but I've just shifted my mindset, and I do love training legs. Like, it takes a really sick person to say like, I love training legs 3 days a week, but I genuinely do feel better. Like, yes, my legs are sore, but I'm not in like joint pain. I'm not in like actual muscle pain. Like, that's not related to soreness
Right.
on my non-training days. Like, I was so tight up here all the time because of like hammering my upper body. And I think my upper body joints just couldn't take the stress of that. And you can, I mean, I did it for a very long time. I've been competing since 2015. Um, like, you can do that for an extended period of time before your body's just like, okay, I can't do this anymore. But
Yep.
I grew up doing gymnastics and taekwondo, which is like all kicking and martial arts, and
Your
my
legs are
body
used to
was
abuse.
used to that lower body abuse,
Yeah.
and I can handle that so much better. And I was like, I would feel better. I would look more like I want to look in the off season. And I do like figure posing a little bit more than the wellness posing, but as I've grown in that, I've learned to love it just as much. So
Yep.
as I've learned more about it and started teaching it, it's all developed in a way that I actually enjoy it. And it took a little bit of forcing it at first, but I was like, this is where I feel comfortable at, and this is what I like looking like. So,
Right. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. There's an interesting thing that you kind of mentioned there is like you're already a pro. So like
mhm.
just because you decided like, oh, I'm going to go to wellness, it's not like you start back over and you're back to being an amateur, right? And if you had been in the position where like you were competing in wellness the whole time and turned pro in wellness, you would be probably closer to a point where like, all right, maybe it's not going to take us a super long time to build the tissue that we need to be competitive at a pro level. But because your focus from like 2015 to what 2021 is
Yeah.
that when you yeah. So for 6 years you were focused much more on your upper body than you were your lower, and now you almost have to kind of restart with now having people who have been focused on wellness for a long period of time. So I think it's again awesome that like if 2021 was the last time you competed and now we're looking at 2025, like that's a 4 year time span of not getting on stage. And again, goes back to what I said earlier of like, people are just not comfortable with staying away from the stage for that long. Like they feel like they're going to get lost in the shuffle or lose their sense of self worth just because they're not getting on a stage. So that's another mental thing that you have to tackle, and like there's two mindsets for you now that like come to mind with from my perspective is like there's the mindset of like, all right, cool, we've done a pretty good job here. Let's go ahead and throw you into a prep and see how you stack up. Or it's no, we're not even close. Let's keep pushing. So where with you and Cam, where do you guys think you're at right now with that?
I kind of feel like I'm in the middle there. I just don't, it's hard because I've never, one, been lean in any kind of wellness pose. So I don't know what I look like lean or next to anybody else either. So I think that's kind of where we're like in this kind of limbo where I don't know what I look like next to any of these like top girls. Whereas like in figure, I was like, okay, I've stood next to some of these like big name Olympians, and like I know what I look like next to them and like what I need to improve upon. Or even if I'd done like a national show and stood next to literally anybody else, it would have that like reference point. I don't have any feedback from judges. I don't have anything to go off of. So it's just like I need to get my lower half as big as humanly possible so that I can stand next to these girls and be competitive.
Yep.
So
Because it's
I
like
still think, sorry, I
no, go
still
ahead.
think that I need more time, but I'm also in the point where I'm very competitive and I don't want to get on stage if I don't think I'm going to even do well at all. So, like, yes, I could do a prep and yes, I could get feedback and see what I look like next to other girls, but I want that to be something that, like, I would rather get on stage and be at 100% or be like, yes, I know I'm where I need to be. And even if I'm like, I don't win a show, at least I'm in the mix and I know I'm like competitive against some of these top girls. So that's my goal with getting back on stage. And yes, I could just go compete this year and like
Just
get
see.
last call outs or just see what I look like. But I personally want to get on stage and be like, okay, this is what I've spent the past 4.5, whatever years building. And like now I'm competitive and not just like doing it to do it.
Yeah, and it's a great point to bring up because like I think a lot of people overestimate how much muscle they put on,
Yeah.
and you don't know how much of that size is going to hang around when you cut out all the body fat. And I think there's a
Hmm.
lot of girls who unfortunately just have a lot of body fat in their lower half that
Yep.
have maybe in their off season they're like, oh, I've got a big butt, oh, I've got big legs, and then as soon as you get them anywhere close to being shredded, we now start to have a different physique. We now start to have someone who doesn't necessarily fit that category, and now you are just a bikini girl who's a little too big, you know,
Yep.
and that's a hard spot to be in, and it's a hard spot for a lot of people to assess and like be real with themselves. So like again, I'm going to commend you on that of like not being in a rush. And that's a hard place for females to be because I've discussed this a number of times. Y'all's timeline is way more limited than men's, you know, and like the things that you have to do to make sure that your body continues to function the way it needs to and functions healthily is way more difficult than a man because we don't
Yeah.
have these fluctuations. We don't have to worry about ovulation. We don't have to worry about like eggs and a menstrual cycle and all these different things. Like we just have to worry about like making sure hormones are at a level point. We don't have to worry about the ebb and flow of it. So it's good that you are giving yourself that time period to like let your body grow into this. And like from my perspective, like I don't know the ins and outs of everything you've done, but like it seems from my end that you are doing things in an appropriate manner that's like allowing you to keep your femininity, allowing you to build the muscle that you need while building the physique that you want, right? And that's a huge thing there. And something that you touched on just a little bit ago was you dealt with some health problems earlier on, and it was gut related, so it wasn't necessarily a hormone imbalance. But the thing that people don't tend to understand is like we could have a small hormone imbalance that drives massive gut problems, right? Like if estrogen's off and you're not eliminating it properly, or your thyroid's off and it's not functioning the way it can, all those things can feed into gut problems. And gut problems is going to be a massive issue when it comes to competitors. And like I dealt with gut problems and I've talked to a ton of people who have dealt with it because of the reality of like what we have to do and the way we have to push our body. If that starts to go and you just keep trying to hammer through it because like, oh, I've got this, I can do this, you're just going to continue to make it worse to where it's probably going to be really difficult to fix that. You know,
Yeah.
and I don't think people fully understand that it's not just like, oh, I ate my fiber and I ate my micronutrients. It's like making sure that everything's in balance, or else that could still be way off, even if you're checking all the boxes on nutrition, you know?
Yeah. And that's another thing too. Like I've wanted to make sure, okay, my gut is in a good standpoint for a long period of time so that I know that there's nothing that comes up while I'm prepping too. Cause I've been through the ringer with my gut. I won't go into that. But it's taken a long time to, at first it was very hard mentally to be like, okay, I have to take a step back and focus on my health because if I don't focus on this, there's nothing that's going to happen when I prep. Like it's just going to be spinning my wheels and it's not going to be effective. So taking that step back and focusing like, okay, this is the foundation of what I need to have health wise before I can start building more muscle tissue or absorbing my food properly or any of these things. Like that is the foundation. And if you cannot have that, you can't prep, you can't like lose body fat, you can't build muscle tissue. Like that is the most important thing. And it took a lot to step back and think like, okay, I'm not going to compete. And this is what my sole focus is going to be on is fixing this issue so that I can get to that point. But I'm so like, it's been so long now that my goal is just to like build muscle tissue and I'm so far removed from like the attachment of competing because I haven't in so long. But it was really hard at first to not get on stage, because I think before that I had competed every year except for 2020, which I did plan on doing a show and it just got canceled, but I
Oh,
shouldn't have done that show, and I'm glad that it did get canceled.
I'm gonna pause right quick. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just really important for people to understand that is like there's just most people that I run into, unless they are just a genetic anomaly, at some point in their career, whether it's amateur or pro, are going to have to take an extended time off,
Hmm.
whether that's a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is. And the main thing that like people should take away from your example is that the part that you said about like I have removed myself from the reward of getting on stage. And like so many people only attach their success in this to stage presence, right? And if you can't detach yourself from that and just focus on the other things that you're getting out of competing, this probably isn't going to turn out well for you, right? Like it's something that's going to be really difficult because if you're that person that like only gets satisfaction out of things because they competed every single year, you're probably at some point going to limit yourself in what you're able to do, especially as you go up to higher level shows. And this has been a common thing that I've talked about with a lot of people is like you've learned to focus on your value coming from other things than just the stage,
Hmm.
right? And figuring out that bodybuilding is much more than just the stage, right? And just what trophy you get for that day. And like, I think you would agree that you probably at this point have figured out that like there's so many other things that bodybuilding has brought you beyond just like some things you can put on the wall or some trophies you can put on a shelf that have become the thing that you've attached yourself to. Like,
Hmm.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like, would you
No,
say that's the truth?
yeah, I think a lot of people, I think they kind of do it for the wrong reasons sometimes. Like maybe they like seeing, or they like getting the attention from being lean, or they like posting their pictures on Instagram from their stage,
Validation.
and they like getting the congratulations and the you look so awesome, or the compliments in the gym that you get. But I've been doing this for so long that I just love training, and like that's not going anywhere regardless of if I am competing or not competing. I love being in the gym. I love seeing progressions with like actual loads that I'm doing in the gym. Like that's fun to me, and I would still do this even if Instagram didn't exist and I was training in a shed on in the middle of nowhere and didn't have any like accolades or anything. I still love training. And I think that's what a lot of people don't have, is that love for training. Or like, would you still eat like this? Would you still like eat on a, not necessarily on a meal plan, but would you still eat these foods if you weren't prepping? Like I do a meal plan and follow my coach's instructions all year round. Like I'm not like fixated on food. And again, this is not something I've always had. I actually gave myself an eating disorder after one of my shows, and I like it was not fun. But I've worked out of that. I have zero attachment to food at all. Um, and I think a lot of people do it for like, okay, I'm gonna diet because I'm prepping, or I'm gonna train harder now because I'm prepping. And it's like you don't have that same motivation if you're not goal oriented towards something. But you really have to like zoom out and think like, okay, this is my long term goal, and this is what I'm doing today to get there, regardless of if I'm prepping or not. Like you still have to take these steps every single day and eat proper and be on a meal plan, and or track whatever it is that you do, and train hard regardless of if you're prepping or not, because most of that muscle tissue is going to be built when you're not prepping. And most people don't understand that, because you don't see a ton of change when you're in an off season, and it's hard to see because you do have more body fat on you. But that's where all of the like magic happens, is when you're in your off season. And that's when a lot of people let off the gas or don't focus as hard on training or nutrition, and that's when it matters most. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, I'm just going to prep. And then this is where I'll see all the change. And then they do their prep and they end up looking exactly the same because they just went from prep to prep.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And a lot of it is like, I think a lot of people are just trying to convince themselves that they're doing the right thing by posting their stuff online. Of like, they'll post up a thing and they'll make one of those like weird things of like grinding daily, or I'm coming for it all, I'm coming to fight, I'm coming to do, and it's like, all right, are you doing that because you actually feel that way? Are you doing it because you want people to like that post and send you messages that you're awesome and you're doing what you need to?
Mm-hmm.
And more people just need to have a realistic conversation with themselves about like why they're doing this and what their real motivations are, and just be realistic with themselves of like, your body's gonna tell you. Like it might not tell you in the first couple of years, but for someone like you that's been competing since 2015, it's gonna tell you at some point of like, hey, we can do this or we can't.
Mm-hmm.
And like I point to my career in the amateurs all the time, because I competed for 12, 13 years and never won a show. I think my body told me what was happening, and like, not only was I not getting the validation of a trophy, but I also was running into a lot of side effects that I were also signs that like, hey, this probably isn't what I need to be doing. That doesn't mean that I have to stop everything I'm doing. I still train the same way I did when I was competitively bodybuilding. I still eat relatively the same. I've reduced how much food I eat. I still do my cardio. I still work on my steps. I'm still focused on all these things. I still get lab work. I still take all my supplementation. I still literally do almost everything exactly the same, except I'm not trying to be some 300-pound behemoth because I'm 6 foot, right? And it's just, like you said, like I would still do this if social media didn't exist and like I was in the middle of nowhere doing whatever, because I have intrinsically attached to, I enjoy how good I feel
Mm-hmm.
after I go to the gym.
Yep.
I love that feeling of like when I put my headphones in, turn on my screaming music, and then I don't have to talk to anyone. Like the entire rest of my day, from the time I wake up to a couple hours before I go to sleep, I'm answering questions to clients. I'm talking to new people who may want to sign up. I'm answering questions on Instagram. I'm dealing with a 4-year-old who's more needy than any client that I've ever had. And like the hour to hour and a half that I get a day where I don't have to do that stuff is like precious to me. And I
Yes.
understand that that helps me feel better. I understand that like if I'm in a slump where I'm like not feeling great about myself and those kinds of things, I can sit here and go, "Oh, I haven't worked out in 4 days. That's probably part of it. I haven't done my cardio in a while. That's probably part of it." And it's like just the fact that I feel better because I went and did that thing is the main thing that I have now attached myself to, versus like, am I getting bigger? And
Yep.
the other thing that you touched on there is like, people just don't know how to shift their mindset from off season to prep, because you have to focus on things other than your physique in off season. If you only focus on your physique, you're going to hate the off season. And that's where most people end up crumbling, is like, yeah, obviously like we've all run into people who like you're prepping or whatever, and like they just can't get through it. They can't make it. They can't stay away from food. They can't push themselves to that place. But the strong percentage of people who end up stepping away from bodybuilding step away from it in that time period of like trying to grind and put on size. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
just the long and short of it there. So learning to take yourself out of that like weekly physique change to now spend X number of years in an off season is not something a lot of people can truly understand, because they don't understand what those metrics even mean.
And it's different for everybody too. Like you have to find what you can attach to, or like set little mini goals that you can work towards in your off season that aren't based on how lean you are, losing weight, or any detachment of that. Like maybe you focus more on recovery, maybe you get some more body work done, maybe you're focused on getting this amount of weight on X machine or whatever it is, but like finding those little micro goals within your off season to still make progression that is focused on building muscle tissue and not on losing body fat, because it's entirely different shift of focus, and you have to like let go of that attachment of I'm not lean or I'm not really lean right now. Like, yes, that's okay. No one's supposed to be lean in their off season. No one looks shredded year round. Like, that's normal and it's healthy. And that's like competing and being stage lean is an extreme. And there's very rare people that can stay that lean year round. And even if they look like they're lean year round, they're probably not. They're probably just like posting throwback pictures all year. And like, I try to be really transparent because I have been in an off season for 4 years, and I'm not just going to like not post my pictures, like,
Right.
or videos or anything. Like, I don't have so much throwback stuff to where I even look the same as I do now. Um, but I try to be really transparent. I try to post my stuff in the off season because I think it gives other competitors like this kind of realistic mindset of like, okay, this person's not lean all the time, or, and I'm not like, I don't think I'm fat right now. I just think I'm a healthy body fat percentage. Um, but I think a lot of girls, especially up at the pro level, especially in wellness, I don't see a lot of girls ever posting like their off season wellness look. Um, but it's very rare that people do that, especially at the pro level. I had a posing client the other day. She's like in an off season, and she didn't want to post her picture on her story. And I was like, why don't you post this? Like, it'll make someone feel better, like you not being super shredded. And she was posting her like posing transformation that we'd worked on. Like, it was like a year difference and it looked really good. And there's things like that. Like, you can focus on your posing. And if you can pose in your off season when you're not super lean, your posing when you compete and you're leaner will be so much better. Like, there's so
100%.
many things that you can attach yourself to in an off season, and I've got this long list now because I've had to find these things that make bodybuilding still fun and interesting, and like setting these micro goals for yourself. Like I said, like, it's not all just how lean can I get and like can I post these shredded pictures of myself. Like, there's things you can find within yourself that you can work on. Maybe it's your mindset, maybe it's your like stretching more or focusing on your recovery. Like, there's so many things that people don't look into that aren't just getting lean.
Yeah, it's hard for people to shift away from physical changes to performance based changes, and like that's the main thing that I tell people, like especially my guys, is like, dude, focus on how good you can be in the gym. Focus
Yeah.
on how strong you can get. Focus on how good your pumps can be. Like, focus on those things versus just like, oh, I don't look great. Because look, I'll be the first to tell you, my off-season pictures weren't pretty. Like, especially in my younger years, I got fat, and
Mhm.
like I never looked amazing in an off-season. But like once I started to get lean, yeah, cool. Now I start to really like how I look, and I can see that what we did in the off-season got us somewhere, right? But
Mhm.
it is really hard to look at those pictures and be like, oh, well, I don't look amazing right now. Like, is this actually what's happening, or is this actually helping me move forward? It's like, well, look at everything else that's happening. If you can't see the changes in your physique in your off season, and your coach isn't really like highlighting those things, is your strength going up? Are you performing better in the gym? Are you sleeping okay? Is your digestion good? Like, all these other metrics you can focus on and go, cool, well, all those are doing really well, so I must be doing something right. And that's your biggest indication that like your off season is going well, not that every week, oh, I'm seeing my pecs got bigger, my shoulders got bigger, this, that, and the other. And it's like, that's just not how this works, and like, I compare when I do check-ins for clients, I always compare week to week, like what each picture looks like, of like, all right, last week it looked like this week we look like this. But very rarely do I go in and go, cool, well, this is what you looked like 6 months ago, and this is what you look like now.
Mhm.
Because if you need that validation all the time, this isn't going to work well for you. But I would rather be able to give you a long stretch of time before I give you that and go, look, this is what we changed. Because like if I just do a couple of months, it's like, oh yeah, there's some change here and there. But it's like if I go a year and you've given me that amount of time, I'll show you
Yeah.
a dramatic change. My mouth didn't want to put that word out, but um, people just like it's the world that we live in, because like you can go on Amazon and buy something and have it delivered to your door later today, and you can DoorDash food and it'll be to you in 20 minutes. And like we're so used to this just instant gratification of everything coming to us immediately that it's way harder to just wait. It's way harder to just sit back and go, cool, I'm going to figure out if this is working sometime down the road. It's a very difficult thing for people to handle mentally, for sure.
And there's so many things that you can do in an off season that you can't do while you're prepping. And if you focus on those things versus like, oh, I'm not doing this, I'm not getting leaner, like I can go out on dates with my husband, I can like get really good pumps in the gym, I can focus on my business, I can have a clear head and like be able to fully brain focus on something versus like being all scatterbrained because I'm super low on carbs, or I can dedicate my time to my recovery because I'm not spending X amount of time doing cardio or whatever it is. But there's so many benefits, like life benefits to not being in prep that like people don't look at. And like you're so laser focused when you're prepping, and I've done this so many times that I know like when you get in this routine when you're prepping, it's like addictive and you're like everything is like you have time for nothing else because you're accounting for every minute of the day, and every single thing that you're doing is focused into something, and you can bring that same focus and structure into your life in your off season if you're disciplined enough. And it's just creating those systems and making it work for you, and putting a little bit more focus and intention and discipline into your life versus like, okay, I'm not prepping, so I'm not going to get up and do cardio or whatever it is. Like, get up and do something that is bettering your life or bettering yourself, whatever it is.
Yep. And learning to build that structure in your life in general when there's not like a countdown happening is
Mm-hmm.
something that's like a huge tool for anyone in anything, right? Whatever your career is, or whatever your goals are and the things you're trying to do, like learning how to build that structure is going to help you exponentially in all those realms of life, and like I think that's the number one thing that I've taken away from bodybuilding is structure and discipline is what's going to get you those things that you desire. Like you're not going to get there by dumb luck. Like some people might, but most of us aren't just going to fall into the goals that we set for ourselves. And if you are just like falling into those goals and it's really easy for you to accomplish, we probably need to have a discussion about what type of goals you're setting, because
Mm-hmm.
you're probably not pushing yourself hard enough.
Yeah.
Like if you're able to just be like, check, I got that one, check, I got that one, it's like, cool, you might be making yourself feel really good, but what are you actually accomplishing? Like, let's set those goals a little higher there. But yeah, I mean, I think we've touched on a lot of really good points there, so we can probably start to wrap it up here. Is there anything like as we go off that you want to leave with people?
I think just tying all of those things that you would do in prep into your off season and like structuring your life and increasing that discipline in your off season and finding those little micro goals to set, and even zooming out and looking at that like what is my big picture goal to be able to like accomplish XYZ, and what am I doing today to compound that and get to the correct place of where I want to be in the future.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, the time, discipline, and all those things is the biggest thing that you can do. Whoever you are, male, female, whatever category you want to go into, is like learn how to be disciplined 24/7, 365, and learn how to delay gratification. Learn how to like be patient and wait for these things to come, because it's not just going to fall in your lap. But plug some of your stuff. Tell everybody where they can find you and like your coaching and all that fun stuff.
So I do the NeuX, like I said. So you can find me on Instagram at or Lianna MC underscore IFBB Pro. I need to change that so it's easier. Um, and then the business that my husband and I run, we do online coaching and then also posing as well. I do virtual sessions with all divisions. So if you're interested in that, let me know. But yeah, it was great getting on a call with you and
Yeah,
talking.
thanks for your time.
Yeah, of course.
Appreciate it. I told you yesterday it's been cool to see you and your husband doing everything together, and like y'all's posing stuff online or in person or whatever, like has all been really solid. So anyone who's looking to elevate their posing, you can do that anywhere. Like if you want to get with her with the NeuX, like obviously you're going to have to be somewhere around one of those gyms that she trains at, but like she can, her or her husband can help you with posing anywhere in the world. So definitely hit them up, and we will see y'all next time. Hope y'all have a good one.